This segment was sponsored by Demolition Fight Team.
But growing up, what's kind of your athletic background? What sports were you involved with as a kid, and how did you kind of develop as an athlete?
I actually played every possible sport I could in Baltimore. I played soccer, basketball, football, baseball, tried everything, and then I eventually found wrestling, walking past the room one day, going to a basketball practice, and the coach said, "Hey, you want to try to tackle someone?" And then they taught me how to double leg, and that was what I did my whole high school career. This segment was sponsored by Holy Hill Media.
So, was MMA always kind of something you had in the back of your mind? Was that something you thought about before you started wrestling, or kind of once you picked up wrestling, you thought, oh, this is something I could do too?
When I was at Notre Dame, UFC fighters would come in there all the time, and I would see them. I would peek in, see them training. They would leave the room private, kind of, so they could go in there. Jessica I, fighters like Kobe Fair, Joey Davies, he's a Bellator vet right now. They would always be in there, and I would always peek in, get a little glimpse. I'd be like, what the hell are they doing? They're punching each other. And then eventually I just was like, yeah, screw it, let's try it. And wrestlers are taking over the UFC pretty much. Like Khabib, everybody, Usman, they're just dominating everybody at the weight class. So I thought I had a good chance with the level of wrestling I have. This segment was sponsored by Mancho's Lounge Restaurant.
So you brought up B2, and you are the owner of the fastest knockout in B2 championships fighting history.
Yes.
B2 fighting championships history, my bad.
Yeah.
9 seconds. Wow. Talk about that moment.
Before we walked out into the cage, I was telling my coach, I'm about to knock this guy out. And I just kept, the way he was holding himself, his demeanor at the face-offs. I just had something in my head. Like, when I go in there and I know I'm going to submit someone and take him down, in my head I'm like, I'm going to submit him. I'm going to take him down. I'm going to walk him across the cage and put him in front of my coach. I try to make it happen. In reality, in my head, I was like, Coach, I'm going to knock him out with a left hook, right hand. And then I went out there. At first, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. He threw his combo, and then I circled. Boom, boom. And then it was like, oh, shit, he went down. And you don't feel, when I knocked him out, I didn't feel his chin click because it was such it's just a light punch, but I've seen his body fall. And I was like, oh, that's pretty fucking crazy. That was the first time I landed a punch right on somebody's button, because you got buttons on your face in certain spots to where if it's clicked at all, it'll put you down. And that's exactly where I hit him, and he fell asleep. It was crazy. It was one of the craziest moments I had as a fighter. This segment was sponsored by Thrax CBD.
So we've talked about you as a coach. We've talked about you as a fighter. Let's talk about you as a promoter a little bit. You've launched Mindless Mania boxing series. What has that experience been like from a promoter standpoint?
Definitely stressful at most of the time until the event's over. It's allowed me to realize how I should act as a fighter to other promotions. Like, it taught me how to what makes the promoter less stressed. Like, having your paperwork in at this time, showing up at this time, being on time at this time. I've been with so many promotions. I fought in Alabama, Kentucky, all over the place, and I've realized what the best things are due in one promotion. And the reason why I started Mindless Mania Boxing Series, because I started at the venue 18 that I hold the events at. That's where I started my career at. And my coach would bring in people from out of state to box me at that arena. And I thought, well, if I can do that for other fighters that I train with, because the whole lineup's my fighters, people I train with, and I match them up with people out of state, other gyms that gets them more attention and more clout to get their name up to the higher ranks quicker. So it allows me to show other fighters how to do it, and it allows me to help out my fighters get the experience they need. Instead of just going people locally, we'll get them in there with people that are from here, and bring them into my show. And it's also another way that I can express my brand and show people who I am.
To access the full interview, please check out the Hot Take Sports podcast on all of your podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Once again, thank you to the Mindless Hulk, Dylan Budka, for coming on to this episode of Combat Talk. Also, shout out to Drake Jimenez of Holy Hill Media for making this interview possible. Be sure to use code HTS at SeatGeek to get $20 off of your first purchase. Once again, use code HTS at SeatGeek to get $20 off of your first purchase. Thank you guys very much for tuning in, and make sure to check out the full interview at the Hot Take Sports Podcast.